Here's the thing about Alex Rins. He's not some ghost story. He's a real rider with real fingerprints on some of MotoGP's nastiest moments. Silverstone 2019, last corner, last lap. Suzuki dancing on the edge while he knifed past Márquez by 0.013. That wasn't luck. That was clarity under pressure. A rider with grip in his head and patience in his hands. And when Honda's house was on fire, he was the one guy who walked in and stole a win at COTA in 2023 on an LCR satellite bike, while the big red H was spinning in circles. People forget that kind of thing when you're circulating in P14 a year later. But the record doesn't. Now look at the present. Rins and Yamaha is a marriage that hasn't even made it to the honeymoon photos. He stepped in to replace Franco Morbidelli, came off a brutal Mugello 2023 injury, and then hit a wall. The scoreboard is cold. As of late August, 45 points for Rins, 109 for Fabio Quartararo, and Rins still hadn't out-qualified Fabio once in 14 tries this season. That's not a slump. That's a pattern. Yamaha's new boss, Paolo Pavesio, says Rins has made physical gains. The camp believes the talent's there, and Andrea Dovizioso is now formally embedded as test rider and rider performance advisor to help rewire the way Rins rides the M1. Translation: the rider and the bike aren't speaking the same language, so they've brought in a translator. Let's break it down. Rins came up on a Suzuki that rewarded a round arc, high mid-corner speed, gentle hands. He U-shaped corners. Yamaha's current reality is different. Over the last year and a half, Rins tried to make the M1 meet him halfway with setup and updates. It didn't. Even he admits the bike today is essentially coded around Fabio's style, and the only real option left is to adapt himself to it. Less U, more V. Close the line earlier, wait a beat longer at entry, brake later, stand it up, fire it out, and stop chasing the corner speed that simply isn't there. He worked on that shift in Austria with crew chief David Munoz and with Dovi's fingerprints all over the new lines. And here's the key sentence from Rins himself. Riding that way still doesn't come naturally. That's the crux. You can copy the markers in a track walk. You can't fake muscle memory in the heat of lap 10 when rear grip is melting. What this really means is the Yamaha M1 until now has demanded contradiction. You want to roll. It wants you to wait. You want to paint a smooth arc. It wants you to close, point, and go. The front tells one story. The electronics and the rear tire tell another. It's not a coincidence that one lap pace is Rins' main wound. When your natural line doesn't match the bike's fastest way around the corner, qualifying becomes a negotiation you keep losing by tenths. Over race distance, you can find rhythm and salvage a handful of points. Over one lap, there's nowhere to hide. That's the scoreboard we're seeing. So why Dovizioso, and why now? Because Dovi is a human metronome with a doctorate in V-shaped riding. He built seasons on braking deeper than you thought possible, compressing the arc, and launching off exit. Yamaha made his role official for 3 years. Test rider plus performance advisor, after Quartararo pushed hard for it. The job isn't just turning laps, it's bridging rider data with engineering decisions, and, crucially for Rins, teaching the how of lines and timing that aren't intuitive to him. If you want to reprogram a rider in season, you don't do it with PDFs. You do it with someone beside you who's done it at the sharp end. What if the riding style is killing his capability? Honest answer? It has been. Not because smooth is wrong universally, but because smooth is wrong on this Yamaha when the clock's on. Rins has been trying to flow where the bike wants you to compress. Every degree he keeps the bike leaned over is another degree the M1 doesn't pay back with speed. That mismatch multiplies under time attack and hammers confidence when you see your teammate popping up the order on the same machinery. What if a riding style flip is enough to change everything? It can move the needle more than any single aero update he's going to get mid-year. The fastest way to a different qualifying row for Rins is not a new swing arm. It's committing to that delay then pounce rhythm until it becomes automatic. It's ugly at first. It feels like you're giving time away on entry. Then it gives it back in a hurry on exit, and suddenly you're not chewing the rear to stay with the group. The catch is consistency. If he half commits, the lap dies twice, once at apex and again at exit. Here's the curveball that could change the whole story. Yamaha is flipping the table to a V4. This is the nuclear option. Misano will see the V4 prototype race as a wild card with test rider Augusto Fernandez, and the factory riders get their taste in the Monday test. That is a profound shift for a brand built on inline-4 character for decades. For Rins, it's either a lifeline or a fresh mountain to climb. On paper, a V4 rewards the exact language he's being forced to learn now. Harder braking, point-and-shoot exits, less dependence on infinite mid-corner roll. If you're Rins, you want to land on that bike already speaking V4. Yes, Rins has proof he can ride a V4. Before the leg shatter at Mugello, he was legitimately sharp on the Honda, and the COTA win didn't happen by accident. The problem is that Yamaha's V4 won't be a Honda clone. It'll be a new animal with its own quirks. Pavesio is careful not to sell it as a magic unlock. Some riders will click right away, others will need time. That's code for, if you're behind your teammate now, this switch can widen the gap or close it, depending on how quickly you adapt. Let's talk psychology, because that's where careers get saved or buried. Rins has carried himself like a rider who knows there's more in the mirror than the sheet shows, and that can be poison. When the bike doesn't respond, you start chasing ghosts, small setup pivots that don't fix the fundamental mismatch. Then Sunday turns into a grind. Bad grid position, dirty air, cooked rubber, and you're fighting in a trench where your talent is irrelevant. Do that enough weekends, and the paddock's memory of Silverstone 2019 fades into a trivia question. You become the guy who used to be. That's the real fight here, refusing to be forgotten. The Dovi layer matters in that context. Quartararo wanted him involved precisely because he and Dovi are opposites. Different riding DNA, different instincts, which makes Dovi's feedback valuable. For Rins, it's doubly useful because the style he needs to adopt is closer to Dovi's than to his own. And the role isn't just test what's on the truck. Yamaha's given Dovi the authority to push the conversation deeper between riders and engineers, to speed up the loop from feeling data-decision. If you're Rins, that's your chance to get very boring and very methodical about execution. No vibe riding. No, it felt okay. Exact markers, exact entry delays, exact exit throttle ramps. That's how you turn a forced style change into muscle memory. What if the V4 arrives and resets the pecking order overnight? Possible, but don't bet your season on it. Even Yamaha admits the decision to field it full-time for 2026 depends on hard numbers. Quartararo has set public benchmarks. If it's not within half a second of the current bike at Misano test pace, keep working. That's healthy skepticism from a rider who's had enough promises. The V4 is a future. It's not a parachute for today. Rins still has to fix qualifying and line discipline on the current bike, or he'll just carry the same handicap into a new platform. Let's zoom in on the nuts and bolts of the change Rins is being asked to make. Braking phase. Later initial squeeze, but more vertical load transfer. That means arriving with the bike straighter, trusting the fork and the arrow to hold you. The old Rins leaked speed in, floated, and built corner speed gradually. The new brief is to slam the door later, reduce entry speed more aggressively, and keep the bike balanced to pivot. That's Dovizioso 101. Apex discipline. Kill the roll time. Yamaha's current envelope doesn't pay you for marinating at lean. Shorten the coasting window. If the front starts murmuring, don't fix it with more corner speed. Fix it by getting off angle sooner. Exit. Commit to the pickup. The more you stand it up early, the more the rear stops boiling, the more the electronics can help instead of fight you. Rins' smooth roll used to protect the tire on Suzuki. On this M1, paradoxically, it can punish it because the bike isn't extracting speed from that phase. This is exactly why he was more competitive in Austria relative to Fabio and then sank again in Hungary. Change like this doesn't stick overnight, and the minute track demands shift, old instincts jump back in. The work now is repetition, not revelation. What if all of this still isn't enough? Then the conversation gets blunt. Rins' contract runs through 2026. Yamaha has already swatted down early exit rumors, and the company is clearly invested in making him work, because they need more than one reference rider to develop a brand new architecture. But contracts don't win grid spots. If he can't qualify, he won't be in the fight often enough to influence development, and the team will naturally gravitate to the data that comes from the front. That's how riders get frozen out without ever being fired. There's also the narrative people keep whispering. He only looks this bad because Yamaha is a mess. Sure, the M1 has big problems, but even inside that context, the delta to Quartararo is real. You don't chase 64 points of gap on bad luck alone. The baldest reality is this: Fabio has found a way to extract the lap time the bike is capable of more consistently, and Rins hasn't yet. You can argue about ceiling all day. The floor is what's costing him weekends. So what does a last-ditch rescue actually look like? 1. Non-negotiable qualifying targets. He needs a repeatable method to land within 2 rows of Fabio on Saturdays. Not once. Not almost. Repeated. That means taking the risk earlier in the weekend. FP on Friday is where you hammer the new lines, not Q2. If the banker lap is still on the old arc, the whole plan collapses. 2. Dovi immersion. Sit on the scooter with him in the track walk and write down the exact entry delay points in T1, T3 equivalents at each circuit. Then go cross-reference those with Fabio's best lap overlays. Leave ego at the door. Steal shamelessly. If you're going to ride like someone, ride like the fastest Yamaha on the sheet. 3. Tire discipline. Stop bleeding exit with long lean. Shorten the lean time. Protect the right-hand sides where temps spike, and give the electronics a profile they can actually manage. That's how you stop arriving on lap 12 with a cooked rear and a 1,000-yard stare. 4. Race starts. You can't live your life in a spray of aero wake and then tell yourself you're not a top 10 rider anymore. Clean starts are oxygen. This is craft. He's good enough to learn it. 5. Monday buy-in at Misano. If the V4 speaks to him on lap 2, grab it with both hands. If it doesn't, fight the instinct to chase a comfort setup. Keep leaning into the new style and let the bike come to you as development rolls. The worst thing he can do is bounce between identities across 2 architectures. What if the V4 clicks for him and not for Fabio? Then Yamaha's headache turns into Rins' opportunity. You're suddenly the guy whose data matters most on the new project. People's memories come back quickly when you start pushing the bike's ceiling forward. What if the V4 is a year away from being race ready and this season keeps grinding? Then we learn what Rins is made of in the places with no spotlight. It's easy to nod for cameras when you win. It's hard to ride the wrong bike the right way for months. This is a test of stubborn professionalism. Let's address the VR46 Morbidelli chatter cleanly and move on. Seats in MotoGP don't get handed out on sentiment anymore. Not for long. Everyone earns tomorrow again on Saturday afternoon. If Rins wants the future he deserves, he has to become impossible to ignore on pace and process, not on reputation. That's the only currency that spends. There's a reason Yamaha is throwing resources at him instead of quietly phasing him out. Pavesio's message is consistent. The talent is there. They see physical progress, and they're putting Dovi directly into the rider advisor lane to help unlock it. And the brand is about to light the fuse on a philosophical change with the V4. That combination, new style now, new engine soon, is the best shot Rins is going to get at a clean reboot without changing uniforms again. It's a last-ditch effort because it has to be. Do we really still want him in MotoGP? Here's the brutal answer. Yes, if he commits to the ugly work and hits specific, boring targets week after week. Rins isn't a nostalgia act. He's the guy who stole Silverstone from the best closer of his generation and humiliated a factory by winning on their broken bike. That rider is still in there, but the grid doesn't give you credit for history. It pays for speed now. So let's set the bar like adults. Over the remaining rounds before Misano test, he needs to outqualify Fabio at least once and average within 3 grid places. Not because it proves he's better, because it proves the style change is real, bankable, and ready to carry into the V4. On Sundays, convert qualifying to top 10 finishes at tracks where tire life suits the M1. No excuses about traffic. Solve the starts. If the pace isn't there, run the lap time program anyway. Short lean, early pickup, clean exits. And give Yamaha data that looks like the future, not the past. At Misano's Monday test, lean into the V4 and accept the learning curve. If it clicks, plant your flag. If it doesn't, be the rider whose feedback turns it into a real weapon. There's a narrow window where you can become the author of Yamaha's next chapter. Walk through it. What if he can't or won't do it? Then the answer changes. This isn't a charity. MotoGP moves fast, memory fades faster, and a seat that doesn't produce pace becomes a liability in a development race. If Rins can't bend his habits, Yamaha will keep listening to the rider who can, and the sport will move on without ceremony. But if he does bend? If he goes all in on the Dovi school, keeps his nerve when the lap feels wrong to his instincts, and brings that old brain for last lap murder back online on a bike that finally speaks his language, then the resurrection is on. And the same paddock that's side-eyeing him now will start talking about how he was always underrated, how he was the only guy who beat Marc at Silverstone, and the only guy who won on the Honda in that era. Because that's how this game works. You're forgotten until you aren't. No fluff, no fairy tales. Alex Rins has been struggling and fading, and he knows it. Yamaha knows it. That's why Andrea Dovizioso is in the room. That's why the riding style is being torn down and rebuilt. That's why a V4 is about to roar at Misano as a statement of intent. It's a last-ditch effort because anything less won't cut it. Does he deserve to be here? Yes, if he chooses the hard road right now and refuses to blink. If not, the sport will answer for him.